Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive, into how to win friends and influence people.
Ah, Dale Carnegie, a classic.
Yeah, it's been a while since I read it, but
Yeah.
it's one of those books that
It's always worth revisiting.
it's always worth revisiting, and you always get something new out of it, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I think so.
So we thought we would dive in
Uh,
and see, if it still lives up to the hype
yeah.
all these years later.
Well, it's interesting because it's not just about, surface level tips and tricks for,
Right.
winning friends and influencing people. It actually delves into human nature, I think.
Yeah.
And that's the foundation, I think, of building strong relationships.
Well, and right off the bat, he says, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. And I'm just curious,
Yeah.
have you noticed that when people get feedback, even if it's well-intentioned,
Yeah.
they just,
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
They get defensive immediately. Their brain is like, protect yourself.
yes,
And that makes it almost impossible to hear your message, let alone be open to changing their behavior.
it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And it reminds me of this time when I was trying to give a friend feedback on their website design, and I thought I was being so helpful,
Yeah.
but they totally bristled at it. And I just thought, I was like, oh,
Yeah. It's that classic example of how, our delivery even overshadows
Yeah.
our intentions. And so he suggests, Carnegie, that instead of, focusing on what someone is doing wrong, we try to understand their perspective.
okay.
Like, why are they doing things that way? What are their motivations?
So trying to see the world through their eyes instead of judging them based
Yeah.
on our own standards.
Exactly. And I think that that shift in perspective can make a huge difference, in how your interactions play out, Instead of creating that wall of criticism, you're building a bridge
Right.
of understanding.
Right. And speaking of building, he also talks about genuine appreciation.
Yes, a lot.
He emphasizes that.
Yeah, like how important that is. But
Yeah. Is it really that simple? Do you just sprinkle compliments everywhere and relationships blossom?
I think, well, there's a difference between genuine appreciation and empty flattery.
Right.
And people can spot insincerity,
Totally.
a mile away. But when you genuinely acknowledge someone's strengths, their efforts, those small things that they do well, that's where the magic happens,
It's about being specific
Yeah,
and sincere, not just generic praise.
exactly. Making people feel seen and valued,
Yeah. Like you're actually paying attention.
like remembering their name is like a mental handshake,
Uh,
acknowledging their individuality, and creating that subtle but powerful bond.
Right. Okay, so that leads us to his 6 principles for making people like you.
Mhm.
And when I was glancing at these, I was like, okay, this is kind of basic stuff.
Yeah,
But then I thought maybe there's more to it
yeah,
than meets the eye.
for sure.
What do you think?
There absolutely is. I mean, they seem simple on the surface, but I think they have surprising depth and practicality,
Yeah.
Let's take the first one. Become genuinely interested in other people.
Okay, so become genuinely interested. So how is that different from just acting interested? Because we've all encountered those people
Oh, yeah.
where it's
The charm,
yeah,
the smiles.
yeah, they're not really listening.
But,
Yeah.
they're not authentic. And that's the key word here, I think, is authenticity.
Right.
And it's about shifting your focus from, trying to impress someone to genuinely wanting to understand them,
Okay.
So
So you're not there to talk about yourself.
Right.
You're there to
Yeah, you're curious.
you're curious about them.
About them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that type of genuine interest, it's magnetic.
It is.
It makes people feel valued and
Yeah.
understood, and that's a powerful foundation
Absolutely.
for any relationship.
Yeah. Think about have you ever felt truly connected to someone who wasn't really paying attention to you? No. It's like talking to a brick
Wall.
wall.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that make you feel warm and fuzzy, he talks a lot about the importance of a genuine smile.
Yes.
And that might seem
Simple.
simple, but
Why is that? Well, a smile is more than just a facial expression.
okay.
It's a signal of friendliness and approachability.
Right.
It instantly disarms people and makes you seem more trustworthy
Yeah.
and likable. And there's even research showing that smiling can trigger the release of endorphins,
No.
both in the smiler and the person seeing the smile.
So it's like a mini mood booster
It is.
for both people.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, well, this next one I personally struggle with,
Okay.
which is remembering names.
Okay.
I'm terrible at it.
Yeah.
But why is it so important?
Well, I think when you forget someone's name, it sends the message that you weren't really paying attention,
Ouch.
that they weren't important enough to remember.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So on the other hand, remembering their name shows respect,
Yeah.
makes them feel valued.
Right.
Yeah. It's like you're acknowledging their individuality.
Like you matter to me
Yes.
enough for me to remember your name.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to work on that.
Me too.
What's the next one?
Being a good listener.
Okay.
And this is so much more than staying quiet, while someone else is talking. It's about actively listening.
Yes.
Truly absorbing what they're saying, asking clarifying questions, reflecting back their emotions, and making them feel heard and understood.
Yeah, because it's so frustrating when you're talking to someone and you can tell they're just waiting for their turn to speak.
Totally.
Yeah.
And they're not really present in the conversation.
Right. And when you actively listen,
Yeah.
you build a connection
You do.
that goes beyond words.
Yes.
It's like you're saying, I value your thoughts and feelings.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that creates a powerful bond of trust.
So being present,
Yes.
not just physically, but like
Mentally.
emotionally.
Emotionally.
Yeah. Okay. I'm taking notes. Okay. What else?
Talk in terms of the other person's interests.
Ooh.
So instead of trying to impress someone with your own, knowledge or accomplishments,
Right.
try to discover what lights them up, what they're passionate about,
Okay.
and engage with them on that level.
Okay. So more engaging than just like dominating the conversation with your own expertise.
Exactly.
No matter how fascinating you think it is.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then how do you find out what he calls their nobler motives are without seeming intrusive
That's a great question.
or like you're trying to manipulate them?
Well, I think it's about being observant and attentive.
Okay.
Pay attention to their words, their body language, their energy when they talk about certain topics.
Yeah.
What are they excited about? What causes them to light up?
Right.
What problems are they trying to solve?
So you're like a detective looking for clues about what truly motivates them.
Exactly.
Okay.
And often people's, nobler motives are tied to their values and aspirations.
Right.
They want to make a difference, contribute to something bigger than themselves, leave a positive impact on the world.
Yeah.
And when you can tap into those deeper motivations,
Yeah.
you're creating a connection that goes beyond those superficial interests.
I love that, finding that common ground where your goals and their aspirations can align.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's the last one?
Make the other person feel important.
Okay, that's a tricky one.
It is.
How do you make someone feel important without being insincere
Yeah.
or manipulative?
Right. I think that's where the genuinely part comes in.
Yeah.
It's not about showering them with empty compliments or inflating their ego.
Right.
It's about finding authentic ways to acknowledge their value and their contributions.
Right, so you're not just a face in the crowd, you're someone special.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that feeling of being seen and valued
Oh, it's powerful.
can be really powerful.
Yes. And when you do that sincerely,
Uh-huh.
it can transform, I think, the dynamic of your interactions.
Totally.
People crave feeling important.
They do.
And when you fulfill that need in a genuine way, you create that strong foundation
Yeah.
for a meaningful connection.
Yeah, and so all these things, these 6 principles, are about shifting your mindset
Yeah.
from me to we.
Exactly.
It's not about using tricks or tactics
Yeah.
to get people to like you. It's about building genuine connections
Yes.
based on understanding respect
Yes.
and valuing the other person.
It's about connection.
It's so interesting because these are surprisingly relevant even in today's world.
Oh, absolutely. These principles are timeless.
Yeah.
Because they tap into those fundamental human needs.
Yeah.
The need
Yeah.
to feel valued, understood, and respected.
Right. And it lays the groundwork for his next big idea, which is how to win people to your way of thinking
Yes.
without resorting to manipulation or force.
Exactly. And that's a whole other...
It's a whole other
Yeah.
can of worms.
So we've covered a lot of ground already, so why don't we take a quick pause and then we'll come back and explore that next part.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into the art of persuasion. Carnegie style. And when I hear the word persuasion, I tend to think of
Used car salesman.
used car salesmen or like
Yeah.
those really pushy people,
Yeah.
who try to guilt trip you into doing what they want.
Right.
But Carnegie's approach is totally different.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
He believes that true persuasion is about winning people over to your way of thinking without, creating resentment
Right.
or damaging the relationship.
Right, because who wants to win an argument but lose a friend in the process?
Exactly.
So how do we strike that balance? What's his secret weapon?
Well, you might be surprised to hear this,
Okay.
but one of his most powerful principles is to avoid arguments altogether.
Wait, really avoid arguments?
Yeah.
But aren't there times when you need to stand up for what you believe in? Like, how can you just let things slide?
I think there's definitely a place for, healthy debate and constructive disagreement.
Right.
But his point is that heated arguments rarely change anyone's mind. They often just make people dig in their heels and become even more entrenched in their positions.
So it's like that saying, you can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into.
Exactly.
So if arguing is off the table, then how do you actually get someone to see your point of view?
Well, it starts with acknowledging their opinion and, looking for common ground.
Okay.
So instead of immediately pointing out where you disagree, try to find areas where you can agree,
Wow.
even if it's just a small point.
So creating that sense of collaboration rather than confrontation.
Exactly.
You're like, hey, we're on the same team here. Let's figure this out together.
I love that.
Yeah.
And from that foundation of mutual respect, you can start to gently guide them towards your way of thinking by asking, thought-provoking questions and presenting your perspective, in a clear and compelling way.
That reminds me of something I learned in a negotiation workshop one time. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
It's perfect. A perfect example of what he's talking about. And another key principle is to appeal to someone's nobler motives.
Okay, that sounds a bit lofty, but what does that actually mean?
Well, it means to tap into their higher values and aspirations,
Okay.
So instead of focusing on what's in it for them personally, you try to connect your request to something bigger than themselves.
Okay, so how does that work in a real-life situation?
Okay. Let's say you're trying to get your team to adopt a new project management system.
Okay.
Instead of just listing the features and benefits, you could talk about how it will free up their time to focus on more creative and strategic work, ultimately making their jobs more fulfilling and allowing them to make a bigger impact.
Oh, so you're appealing to their desire for growth and autonomy and making a meaningful contribution.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And by framing it that way, you're much more likely to get buy-in
Yeah.
because you're tapping into their intrinsic motivations.
Yes, not just another task on your to-do list. It's an opportunity to excel.
Right.
Yeah.
And grow.
And grow and make a difference.
And make a real difference.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. And he also believed in the power of storytelling
Oh, yeah.
to make your ideas more persuasive,
Totally.
Have you ever noticed how a well-told story can capture your imagination
Oh, for sure.
and emotions in a way that just dry facts and figures can't?
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
can totally draw you in and make you feel like you're experiencing those events firsthand.
Exactly.
I remember this one time when I was trying to convince my family to go on a camping trip with me, and they were all hesitant, oh, bugs, and uncomfortable sleeping arrangements. But then I started telling them stories about my childhood camping trips,
Yeah.
the incredible sunsets we'd seen and the hilarious mishaps we had, and that feeling of peace and connection with nature. And by the end of my story, they were all on board.
That's a great example of how storytelling can bring your ideas to life
Yeah.
and make them more relatable and persuasive.
It's like you're painting a picture with words, allowing the other person to see your vision and feel the emotions behind it.
Exactly. And finally, he suggests that sometimes the best way to motivate someone is to challenge them.
Oh.
So instead of just telling them what to do, appeal to their competitive spirit
Yeah.
or their desire to prove themselves.
Oh, instead of saying, you need to finish this report by Friday, you might say, I have a feeling you're the only one who can pull this off by Friday.
I love that.
Yeah.
By framing it as a challenge, you're giving them a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
And empowering them to rise to the occasion.
And they feel more invested in it.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how these principles of persuasion can be applied in so many different areas of life.
Yes.
It's not about manipulation or trickery.
Right.
It's about understanding human nature,
Yeah.
building relationships,
Yeah.
and communicating in a way that resonates with people's deeper motivations.
I love it.
Okay, so now that we've covered the art of persuasion,
Yes.
let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Carnegie's principles of leadership.
Okay.
Because even if you're not in a formal management role,
Right.
these ideas can be incredibly helpful
I agree.
in influencing and inspiring others.
Yes.
So one principle that really stood out to me was begin with praise and honest appreciation.
Mm.
And when I first read that, I was kind of like, isn't that just sugarcoating things? Shouldn't you just be direct and honest,
Yeah.
even if it's not always positive?
Well, I think it's definitely more than just sugarcoating.
Yeah.
Carnegie understood that people are much more receptive to feedback,
Uh-huh.
even constructive criticism,
Right.
when it's delivered in a positive and supportive context.
So creating that safe space where they feel comfortable
Yeah.
hearing your suggestions for improvement.
When you start by acknowledging their strengths
Right?
and accomplishments, you're disarming their defenses
Yeah.
and creating a sense of goodwill.
Everyone wants to feel appreciated and respected,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's a good one.
So once you've established that foundation of positivity and respect, how do you actually address those areas for improvement without making people feel demoralized or defensive?
Well, Carnegie was a big believer in calling attention to mistakes indirectly.
Okay.
So instead of pointing out their flaws in a blunt or critical way,
Right.
he suggests using subtle cues or gentle guidance to help them see the error of their ways.
Okay, that sounds tricky. How would that work?
Okay, let's say you have a team member who consistently misses deadlines.
Okay.
Instead of saying, "You're always late," you might say something like, "Hey, I noticed this project hasn't been completed on time. Is there anything I can do to help you manage your workload more effectively?"
Oh, so you're not placing blame, you're expressing concern and offering support.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another powerful technique is to talk about your own mistakes before pointing out theirs.
Oh,
This shows that you're not perfect,
Right.
that you're also learning and growing.
right.
And it makes you much more relatable and approachable.
So we're all in this together.
Exactly.
We all make mistakes. Let's learn from them.
Yes.
Support each other.
And when people feel like they're not being judged or criticized,
Right.
they're much more likely to be open to that feedback and willing to learn and grow.
Okay, so we've got praise and indirect correction and leading by example.
Yeah.
What else? What other leadership gems does he have up his sleeve?
Well, he was a big advocate for asking questions instead of giving direct orders.
Okay.
This empowers people to think for themselves and come up with their own solutions,
Right.
which is much more motivating than simply being told what to do.
Yeah, so instead of saying, go do this, you might say, what do you think is the best way to approach this?
Exactly.
You're like-
And by asking questions, you're engaging their critical thinking skills,
Right.
giving them a sense of ownership and encouraging them to take initiative.
And when they feel like they have a say in how things are done, they're more likely to be invested in the outcome.
For sure. And another crucial principle is to let the other person save face.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Even when you need to correct a mistake, do it in a way that preserves their dignity and self-respect.
Right.
Avoid public humiliation
Oh, yeah.
at all costs.
I think we've all been in those situations where we've seen someone being publicly shamed.
Oh, it's the worst.
And it's just like so cringy.
It's awful.
Yeah, everyone deserves to be treated with respect.
Absolutely.
Even when they make mistakes.
Even when they mess up.
Okay, so last one.
And finally, remember to praise even the slightest improvement.
Oh.
When people are trying to change their behavior or learn a new skill, it can be a long and challenging process.
For sure.
But by acknowledging their progress, even the small steps forward,
Right.
you're encouraging them to keep going and reinforcing those positive changes that they're making.
It's like you're saying, I see you, I see your effort, and I believe in you.
Exactly.
And that belief can be so motivating
It is.
and empowering.
So to sum it up,
Yeah.
Carnegie's principles of leadership are really about creating a positive and supportive environment
Yeah.
where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work.
It's about creating that culture of growth and collaboration
Yes.
where everyone feels safe to take risks,
Mm-hmm.
learn from their mistakes, and strive for excellence.
I love that.
As we're going through all this, I'm just really struck by how relevant all of this still is.
I know, me too.
Even though it was written, almost a century ago.
Yeah.
It's like he tapped into something about like human nature that just,
Timeless.
yeah, it's timeless and it transcends trends and time and all that. And I was also thinking as we were talking about all this that even though he doesn't use the term explicitly in the book, like he's talking a lot about emotional intelligence.
He is. It's
Oh.
kind of the unspoken theme, I think. Right.
Right. And for those who might not be totally familiar with the concept, like how would you define emotional intelligence and how does it connect to Carnegie's work?
Well, emotional intelligence, I think, is essentially the ability to understand and manage your own emotions.
Right.
And to be sensitive to the emotions of others.
Okay.
So it's about being aware of how your words and actions impact those around you.
Right.
And being able to navigate those emotional currents with skill and empathy.
So it's not just about like being nice.
Mm.
It's about being self-aware and intentional in your interactions.
Exactly.
Right.
And when you look at Carnegie's principles, so many of them are tied to, emotional intelligence, like
Yeah.
Being a good listener requires empathy,
Yeah.
the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes
Right.
and, understand their feelings.
Mhm.
And avoiding criticism and focusing on appreciation requires self-awareness.
Okay.
Understanding how your own emotions might be influencing your behavior.
That's true. And so he might not have used the term, but he was definitely on to something.
He was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that really struck me about the book is how he uses real life stories
Yeah,
to illustrate his points.
I agree.
It's not just theory,
Yeah.
it's practical wisdom,
Yeah, it is.
backed by these really compelling examples.
And they prove that these principles have been, successfully applied by influential figures throughout history.
Right. Like, do any specific examples come to mind?
Well, one of the most memorable ones is about Abraham Lincoln.
Oh,
Early in his career, Lincoln was known for being quick to criticize and
Sure.
condemn his opponents.
yeah.
But over time, he learned the power of empathy and understanding,
Okay.
and he realized that by trying to see things from their perspective,
Huh.
he could build bridges
Right.
instead of burning them.
Wow. So if Lincoln could master these skills,
Yeah.
I think we can all find
Amidst of a civil war, no less.
Yeah.
You know?
To apply them
Yeah.
in our own lives.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive
It has.
into this book.
Yeah.
And we've covered so much.
We have.
We've talked about, the importance of understanding human nature
Right.
and, really mastering the art of persuasion
Yeah.
and leading with empathy
Yes.
and tapping into the power of emotional intelligence.
It's been great.
It has. And, I feel like I've learned a lot
Me too.
revisiting it.
Yeah. It's a refresher.
It is. And for those who haven't read the book, or maybe it's been a while,
Yeah.
I highly recommend
It's a classic for a reason.
it. Is, yeah. And even if you're already familiar with it, revisiting these principles
Always good.
can be so insightful and inspiring.
Agreed.
So this has been a really great deep dive. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
And remember the power to, build those stronger, more meaningful relationships
Yes.
is with each of us. So go out there and make those connections.